Welcome to Rehab Unplugged. We dive deep into physiotherapy and rehabilitation, bringing you honest conversations with industry experts and uncovering the tools and stories shaping the world of rehab today. Let's dive in.
Welcome to a new episode of Rehab Unplugged. I'm your host, Andres, and today I have a very special guest with me, Glenn Withers. Glenn is not only the Australian Physiotherapy and Pilates Institute co-founder, but also one of the world's most sought-after physiotherapists and Pilates master trainers. Glenn is a published author, international speaker, and co-creator of the APPI Method. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you very much, Andres. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming here. And Glenn, for listeners that are new to you, can you share a quick overview of your journey in Pilates and a little bit of you, who you are?
Sure, yes. Firstly, hello, everyone. So I'm a physiotherapist by background. I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and grew up very much in sort of Aussie rules football environment, if anyone's seen that. And so I was very much in sort of the sports area. Sadly didn't make it as a professional athlete, so went down another road to still be involved in that environment, which was physiotherapy. I had a massive crush on a girl at university, and she turned out to be enormously into Pilates. And so therefore I had no choice but to try it out myself. And that was Elisa, who is now my wife and the co-founder of APPI. And that's really what led me into Pilates. And, from there, the story evolved, shall we say.
That is a wonderful story, Glenn. Very, very inspiring. So yeah, I want to talk as well about how APPI and Wibbi come together and what makes this collaboration so special.
Well, look, I think, we'll delve deeper, I guess, into sort of, Pilates and APPI and its involvement and journey in a moment. But I guess the two of those things are connected. So as APPI grew and being a clinician, I was frustrated in a way that I couldn't give my patients and my clients the quality of home exercise programs that I wanted. And, we are talking, gosh, I don't know, Andres, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when it first evolved. But we had our teaching manuals and, we were effectively, photocopying different pages from a teaching manual to hand to clients to give them their home programs. And it was an enormously inefficient way to work. It was, poor quality in a way, and APPI on the clinical side of what we do, we've always sort of prided ourselves on being innovators in the industry and doing things at the highest possible level we could. And, photocopying black and white pictures of exercises, photos we took, 5 years before was really frustrating. And it was wasteful because on that one page, I might have 4 exercises because they're the levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4, but I only wanted my client to do level 1 of this exercise or level 2 of this exercise. And it was just, annoying and not as professional as I would like. So that's effectively how the collaboration came about. I met Etienne and some of the other sort of group that now make up Wibbi over in London, where I was working. And, they sort of said to the idea that, why don't we bring it to life? We have this platform and this program, and maybe we can bring your concept to it. And that's really how it sort of evolved from me seeing a really great physio software exercise platform and my frustration with what I was trying to do with my Pilates exercises. And so the collaboration came about to try to create, a best-in-class digitized home exercise program. It's grown from there.
Okay. I think while you were talking, we didn't have actually scripted this question, but I find so interesting that, rehab therapists will give a patient probably pages of different exercises that they need to follow. So I wonder how, 15, 20, 30 years ago, you as a therapist would measure the impact of the exercises if you actually don't know if the patient is doing the exercise correctly. Because I guess in a page, you see a picture of the movement, a drawing of the movement, but you actually don't see the proper technique of the movement.
Yeah. I mean, I think the short answer to that is we didn't. we didn't. We were trusting. Well, no, that's not true. Let me tell you this. You always know when you see them again, right? They come back. And the way we work is you're right, was to give you a home exercise program, and then you come back on your next visit. The first thing would be, how your exercise is going. All right, why don't you show me how you're doing it? And when you ask that question and your client then has no idea what they're doing, it's pretty clear they haven't been doing their exercises. But I think, what we have now is such a much more connected world where we can be, much more effective. And so it would be, in a way, giving these stick drawings, which is what I used to do before Wibii came along. And, then we progressed on to being able to actually, send them the programs and design the programs. And now obviously it's progressed on again. But, in answer to the question, in between actually seeing a client, we really had no idea. And, one of the things that is difficult is in our Pilates teacher training, we teach our teachers to understand how people learn. Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, some people are tactile learners. Whereas, giving static pictures to a client, we weren't really touching on any of those actual learning techniques and that sort of didactic learning knowledge we've learned from the world, and that impacts our teaching greatly. And we weren't doing that from a home exercise program. And that's why digitizing what we do is so important, I think.
APPI has a product called Pilates Pro Live. What is Pilates Pro Live, and how has that influenced the global Pilates education?
Okay, good question. Well, I guess probably before I expand on that, it's probably worth me just talking a little bit more about sort of what APPI is a little bit for those that don't know about us, for example, Andreas. So APPI stands for the Australian Physiotherapy and Pilates Institute. As I touched on in my intro there, that I grew up in Australia as a physiotherapist. And when, I was trying to win Elisa over, I had to become interested in Pilates. And what that led to was we got a scholarship from the Australian Physio Association to investigate if Pilates was relevant for low back pain. Now, we're talking 25 years ago. And so there was no real evidence around Pilates at the time. If you were to do a medical database search or anything, you wouldn't find anything of note that would talk about how Pilates was actually effective. So that's in a way how APPI was born. We did originally our initial training in Pilates to become certified teachers. And as we were going through that, what we saw was this brilliant exercise method, but the level that was the sort of beginner level was still far too high in relation to many people that had had an injury. And so when you look at pain is a chemical, acetylcholine, and that inhibits how certain muscles work. And in our Pilates training, when we're going through it, it was like, this is a really good exercise for people with low back pain. But when you looked at the pain evidence and you looked at the evidence around motor relearning and muscle balance, actually it wasn't the case, because the muscle that we're talking about is a muscle that doesn't actually work. So we had to come up with our own method, our own version of how Pilates could be incorporated in the rehab setting. So coming up with the APPI method, we looked at three specific things: pain, pathology, and function. And we know what pain does to muscles and movement. That was very evident in the literature. We looked at the common pathologies that as therapists we come across: back pain, hip pain, neck pain, knee pain, etc. And then we looked at function. Does this exercise actually help somebody regain a functional movement pattern? And it's those three things that underpin what the APPI method is. And so by developing the method and creating a step-by-step program where anyone from any point of injury can now undergo a Pilates exercise, and that builds them up in a structured way back towards normal form and function is the backbone of what APPI is all about. So in relation to how do we feel it shaped healthcare, as the APPI method became more well known throughout the world, it started to become much more adopted as to how we manage clients. So getting people off a treatment bed and getting them to actually focus on movement re-education, or what we call movement medicine. And so we feel in that basis, we've had a significant impact on reshaping healthcare in the way that physiotherapy specifically, and now wider into more of the movement therapies, how we look at movement as an actual form of treatment and movement re-education as a form of treatment. And so then combining that sort of innovation, if you like, and that growth of being able to show that not only is movement re-education a really important way of rehabilitating somebody, but having such a structured program, your level 1, 2, 3, 4, as it moves on, and basing your choice of exercise on really strong clinical reasoning processes. We have a process we call the 5-stage rehab model, and at each stage, it defines what exercise it is that you choose. By allowing that process to happen, we found that Pilates can be applied anywhere. So it doesn't have to be that you have to go to a Pilates studio and pay an enormous amount of money, which is all fine. That there's nothing wrong with that. We don't have anything against that. But it should be a movement principle that can be applied anywhere, in any socioeconomic environment, to any language, to any process, whether somebody is paying for a service, which might mean their motivation is at a certain level because they're paying for it and they have an expectation, or they're in a public health system whereby they're not paying for it, and maybe that has an effect on their motivation. But if I can find an environment where they have a successful movement experience, they gain interest and belief in the system that we're trying to build. So then taking that and putting that onto a platform where not only can they have the interaction where they're with me, but I can now design very quickly, within 4 or 5 very quick clicks of a mouse, I can now create a program where they get that personally made. They can access it on any device, on their phone, on their iPad, stream it up to their TV at home. That is where the compliance, and therefore if we get that compliance, which you touched on earlier, if we can improve that patient compliance to their exercise program, our ability to progress sessions jumps up significantly as well. So, how do we feel we've sort of impacted? I guess in our view, I think we've changed the way healthcare works significantly, especially here in the UK and Australia. And I think we've been able to do that in multiple sort of environments and languages as well.
And that's so interesting. I think something that I personally also want to share is I've been to some conferences of healthcare and with healthcare leaders. And one topic that I hear a lot is the social determinants of health. So I think now that you were talking about like a person being able to access certain programs also on their phone, not only by accessing, let's say, for example, a Pilates studio, I think that opens the spectrum of the amount of people that can actually be part of these rehabilitation programs with Pilates. So I find that so interesting. To be completely honest, I didn't think about it, but I think that's where I find these conversations so insightful. I think the more we use the phones and all these digital tools that we have available to improve our health and actually follow programs, I think that's better for you as a rehabilitation therapist. That's good for you as an instructor, and that's good for me as a patient. How did the pandemic reshape Pilates practice? Because particularly the balance between virtual and in-person sessions completely changed back then in 2019 approximately. It was just a completely rupture of what we knew before as the regular healthcare system for us.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, what a time for everyone around the world. Hey, it's funny because even still now, people will say, "Oh, how long ago was that? And, you forget that there's sort of 18-month, 2-year period that you sort of miss out on. I can think, it was a few years back. It was actually 5 years back. So the pandemic, from my experience, I can only talk about its view from my experience, right? Because I think in different countries around the world, it was experienced quite differently, and in different industries, the impact was different. For us in the physio and Pilates world, the impact of the pandemic was huge because we were a people fronting business, right? People came to our studios and to our centers for their treatment. They came to our studios and their centers for their classes and their one-to-ones, and that all stopped overnight. So look, I think in one way, the pandemic pushed forward the sort of digital advancement of physiotherapy and Pilates by 4 or 5 years. And we probably wouldn't be doing what we are now doing if it wasn't for us having to adapt, having to find a new way to reach out to our clients, to connect with our clients. I think the biggest ongoing impact is in the Pilates world, you have different types of classes. So you have mat classes, reformer classes, or what we call sort of studio classes where they use all the large apparatus. From a physio world, incorporating Pilates, we do a lot of sort of one-to-one rehabilitation using many of the different pieces of apparatus. So I think it allowed us to show that being able to do online sessions can really help people when they don't have the ability to get into a center. I still personally believe that when we're rehabilitating somebody, you really want to have that interaction with them. But what you want is a way for them to continue to have high quality practice in between your sessions. I think mat classes, that had a massive impact because everything went online. And as a result of that, there was a massive boom in online access, and certainly from when social media came into the equation, and social media had a massive impact on what people had access to. And so as a studio owner, it was challenging because a lot of people could get things on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube absolutely free, and accessing that, and quite often maybe the quality of the teaching wasn't very good, but they were still doing it because it was there. So what we saw on our side is we saw quite a shift away from people wanting to do just pure mat classes because they were doing that at home and they were using online resources to do that. But a real need and want for high quality instruction and teaching. And that's what brought people back into our studios, is they still had access to a lot of this stuff as a result of the pandemic. But I think people started to really realize the vast difference in relation to quality of teaching and quality of resources and quality of the studios. So, our industry is forever changed as a result of it, because it brought the concept of online consultations, online classes, online one-to-one sessions. That forced us as an industry to grow quickly, to adapt quickly, and to embrace sort of innovations within the tech sector, so to speak, which is probably something that our industry as a whole is somewhat resistant to. But I think on the sort of coming out of that, and with Pilates right now going through a massive boom, I think we just have to be really conscious of quality and what information is out there, and what information actually has some more sort of background and standards to what it does.
Absolutely. And I think to be able to access high quality exercises that are tailored to your specific situation, I think that's actually key for a good rehabilitation. It's interesting that sometimes we have a bunch of apps where we have our own portal within the app, right? We have our own, let's say we store our data in these different apps. But when it comes to healthcare, I don't think I didn't used to think this way before, but we do not have an app that actually stores the way we are progressing towards the goal as a patient. And I think after the pandemic, it's when I actually started to see more clinics, more companies shifting towards this kind of method. I, for instance, received from a clinic a couple of years ago a program as a patient, but I actually had access to my own portal. And so I think this new shift of not only me having to go to the clinic to see my progress, but also for me to be able to see it in my own phone. And I think it's key. So it's good to hear and very interesting to hear from you how this is also applied within the Pilates world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key thing that you've touched on there is the combination of still the real importance from a rehab point of view, the real importance of a person seeing you and and touching you and teaching you and understanding your body. And I still don't believe we can get the same level of understanding of a person's body and movement through a screen than we can when we're working with them, because the body is so intuitive in the way it moves. And often I can send you an exercise, and if I haven't taught you that exercise as well, you might be doing it only very slightly wrong, but that can have an impact on how well you do it. And that's some of the danger when you get generic programs, when you see these things pop up on Instagrams, like do this exercise, do 8 reps of this exercise 3 times a day, and in 4 weeks, this will be you. And it's like, okay, well, it's probably not going to be. And actually, probably 3 of those exercises aren't appropriate for 80% of the population anyway. So I think the importance when we talk about the digitization in the tech world is, again, that there's a, for want of a better word, the ability to create a tailored program specific to an individual, and then giving them the ability to have various forms of feedback to allow them to do that accurately in between the times they come to see their teacher, their clinician, their instructor, is where I think personally that the sort of digitized world and the tech world has a lot to offer us.
And I want to go off script again because I think we're talking about that. What do you think about AI and AI being applied in the sort of examples that we were just discussing? Okay, sure, yes. I think a hybrid model, it's what it's ideal, right? For you as a patient to have a portal where you follow your exercises, but also to go in person and talk to your therapist and for them to guide you. I totally agree with you. I think that's super important. But what's the role of AI, or what's your opinion on that? Because we have seen certain apps where through virtual reality, some of the AI applications can give you some feedback on that. What's your opinion on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we have to look at it on 2 ways. The advancements that AI can bring to any industry is going to be very, very good if used in the right way and understood in the right way. Now, I might just be a little old school here, Andres, but I don't think AI is ever going to be able to replace the understanding of the human body the way a movement trained educator can. Because and I'm not a tech person, but if I understand the way AI works correctly, AI takes a whole bunch of programmed information and then it continues to evolve, it continues to learn through effectively like a trial and error process of how we effectively engage with it and use it. So I think there's going to be, fascinating ways that I probably don't even know yet of how AI will help us and evolve the way we work. I still believe the human body and the way the human body moves is so intricate and individual to a person. And then when you layer on top of that biomechanical adjustments in response to pain, that varies between every person. So I could teach, the same exercise to 10 people, but actually I'm not teaching them the same exercise because each of those 10 people are slightly different. They move slightly different. Their cues are slightly different. So I think it's finding that balance. where is the good in AI that can help us get better? Because I truly believe that one of the things we say in the APPI head office every day is, we need to be better tomorrow. In some way, we don't know what it is, but we've got to try to be better tomorrow. And something we do, the way we talk, the way we greet each other, the way we evolve the exercises, the way we improve our teaching courses, the way we improve the Pro Live product, but we can always get better. So I think there's one side of sort of healthcare and a little bit in the Pilates industry that doesn't want to evolve, that is sort of, no, this is how it should be done. And I don't think that we should be black and white. I think enhancement of technology is going to be a good thing. I don't think I quite really understand yet exactly how that interacts with Pilates in its optimized way. But I also believe that the person and the instructor and the intricacies of the human body and the way it moves, I don't think AI will be able to handle all of that, but who knows?
Thanks so much for giving me your opinion about that. I know we went off script, but I think it's so important to know with this type of disruptive technologies, what's your opinion and the opinion of healthcare leaders. I think, that's super important. What digital trends are making the biggest impact on Pilates instructors and practitioners today?
Yeah, good question. I mean, you see, this can open a massive can of worms, Andreas, because there's a massive debate, to be honest, in the Pilates industry at the moment, because Pilates is being influenced enormously by the social media phenomenon that is happening at the moment. Okay? But Pilates is a structured form of exercises, and it has key components to it, such as precision, the breath, how we activate the center, the alignment, and some of the digital trends, I think, trying to take the word Pilates and its popularity and almost sort of decommissioning what Pilates actually is. And that side of it, I have a bit of a concern with. So when you look at sort of some of the tech and the digitized world that's coming in, like, there's things like people wanting to have a screen on a Pilates reformer, so it like becomes like a Peloton bike on the reformer, right? And your teacher is then instructing you through a virtual class. Now, okay, that's all good and well, but there's a lot of safety issues about how a person uses a machine like a reformer, because you've got lots of moving parts, and that can be, questionable, I think, if somebody who isn't experienced in using a Pilates reformer is doing that basis. The other thing is how it works, because in a lot of Pilates exercises, you're changing position all the time, right? So when are you looking at the screen or not looking at the screen? When you've got a teacher teaching you, they're moving around. So it's finding that balance. But I think there's a lot of people trying to find a way of how they can make, the Peloton of Pilates and how that can work. And so that will be an interesting space. There's people trying to bring in more fitness-based tech into Pilates. So looking at, the metrics of how the body's working in a Pilates class. So heart rate, looking at calorie burn, and digitizing what the body's reaction to it. And some facilities are putting it up on a screen, and all of your sort of physical reactions to the Pilates exercise are being monitored, which again can be good, but also you've got to think, well, what's Pilates designed for? Pilates isn't designed, for example, to be a high calorie burning exercise. So is tracking that metric through digital and AI input, is that relevant to what Pilates actually is? So that's an interesting one. I think the sort of boom of app-based Pilates and apps linked to Pilates is probably a big influencer at the moment as well. There's all sorts of apps that are coming out and that are there. And I think it's just trying to find that balance again between the embracing the digital elements that are there, but also understanding that Pilates specifically, if we're talking about that, is a a unique form of movement that does need to be taught correctly rather than just done. There's a big difference between somebody, having a fitness session that is based around Pilates and someone actually doing a Pilates exercise or a Pilates session, which is linked to how Pilates was sort of designed to be.
And I think today more than ever, we have access to tons of data. I think we have, as you just mentioned, we have, the Apple Watch, we have the Fitbit, we have all these sort of different tools to measure different sort of information about our body. But I think you touch on a very important point. It's not only about having all this data, but how do we interpret that data and what is actually relevant to, let's say, for example, Pilates or my rehab exercises, and what is not. Like, maybe is it measuring my heart rate relevant to what I'm doing? Maybe yes, maybe no. But I think that's interesting, and I think personally that's why also it's important to count with a Pilates instructor or a rehab therapist that teaches me as a patient how to read that data and how to be more informed and not just to sort of read anything and everything.
Yeah, and to also ensure that you listen to your own body. Your own body is not up on a screen. It's not digitized, but it's full of information and it's feeding back to you constantly. So when you talk about movement re-education, there's a lot about getting a person to understand what their own body is telling them, and you're not going to get that off a screen. A screen can help improve your understanding of how your body is functioning, but I think we just have to find that balance, as I keep saying, finding that balance between embracing all of this great information that's around us, but not forgetting that the human body is probably the most intelligent thing that has ever been created. And I don't think any other device is going to be as intuitive and as clever as the human brain and the human body and what it does.
All right. What tech advancements excite you the most in the Pilates space over the next 5 years?
Yeah, good question. I mean, look, I'm biased because I think it's Pilates Pro Live is the greatest tech advancement that's interested us. I think what I'm really interested in is how technology can keep a teacher, an instructor, a physio, a rehab therapist connected with their client in between sessions. That's where I think the really key component is. If we can improve that sort of connection and link between client and therapist in between the face-to-face sessions, we can improve so much in our outcomes. So, things like being able to video record somebody doing an exercise, and then I can review that very quickly and send back some guidance to a client or to a patient. That's really exciting. I think finding a way that sort of digitized products, it's probably in and around the app-based technology that can help somebody get instant feedback if they're doing the exercise correctly. And this is where AI will come into play. So if you can have sort of a gold standard of a movement and you can overlay a person doing that, and they can always get instant feedback about whether they're doing it right or wrong, and they can maybe even get some verbal cues that can help them based on the movement rather than a generic set of cues. If there's a way that AI can interpret the movement and layer that onto a gold standard and give direct feedback, that would be really interesting.
So before we finish, of course, I want to know, how has integrating Wibii enhanced your approach to prescribing Pilates exercises?
Yeah, good. I was hoping we'd get a question like this. It's completely changed it, and that's what I'm most proud about with Pro Live, and then most impressed with the ongoing progressions that you guys at Wibii are doing. You're continuing to improve everything, which really resonates with the way that we work at APPI. But I think being able to offer a bespoke, digitized home exercise program directly to my client, taking no longer than 2 minutes at the end of a session, that client walks out of my center with, gives the client such a higher level of appreciation and respect for who we are as a center. So when I talk to people about the benefits of a program like Pro Live, like one of the quickest and easiest benefits is that you are going to elevate yourself against any of your competitors because your client walks out of your center with a ready-made, tailor-made, bespoke program that they can access on anything, anywhere in the world. Now, one of the unique features that the Wibbi software has is the ability for me to also put a date on that. So I can create a program, put a date on that, and so that program runs out in 7 days, for example. So as a studio owner, as a business owner, that's really good because that's going to get my client coming back, right? So I'm going to give them a program for a week, it lasts for a week, and then I can set a date on that. And that's when they're like, oh, my program's run out. I need to go and see Glenn again. And that unique feature allows me to feel much more confident in how is this program not just helping my client improve, but helping me as a business owner and a studio owner continue with things like retention and helping to increase revenue on that side. So when you ask, what do I think, how has ProLive helped us? It's elevated us significantly above our competitors. It's helped my staff because they can get really high quality programs done in such a quick time. It helps with their note taking because even with their note taking, instead of having to list out every exercise, it can be see program on Pro Live because it's all connected. And then the clients are just so grateful that they have the choice. If they're visual learners, they can watch the video. If they're more sort of static learners, pictures, they can read the text. They can look at the still picture. They can look at the diagram. Whichever way resonates with them, it's much easier. And so, the fact that we've got a program that I can so quickly and easily create my programs for my clients. The fact that, for example, we could be working together. I could have seen you in one of my studios in London, given you a program, and then we can have an online consultation. But I know your body already. I know you know the basics of the exercise. You can give me feedback on what the exercises are. And then I can recreate your program, send it straight back to you so quickly. I know a lot of my clients, for example, we're coming up to summer here in the UK, and a lot of our clients will go away for 2 weeks. Now, the body can change a lot in 2 weeks. Some people go away for 4 weeks, 6 weeks. So I can create your program, send you away with a program for 2 weeks, and then we can check in, have a quick check-in online. I can update your program, send it back to you. And I know that you've got video tutorials on there that you can watch. You've got exact text data. I can use whatever dosage I want. A lot of the old way we did it, everything was 10 repetitions of whatever. I can use time, I can use duration, I can use reps, I can use whatever I want. And it's so quick and easy for me to do that, that it's completely changed, not just the view of people of us as a center. It's changed the way that me and my team as therapists, we can work. It's saved us time. As a studio owner, it's great because it helps me with revenue because my retention rates are higher because I can put that date based onto the program. And of course, word of mouth is enormous in our industry. So the better somebody thinks the service is, the more they tell other people. So all of those elements, I think, is sort of why Pilates Pro Live has been such a game changer for us.
Perfect, Glenn. So lastly, to finish, where our listeners can learn more about APPI and what resources you particularly recommend for Pilates professionals looking to dive deeper into this topic.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunities for that. I mean, look, go on to our website, so appihealthgroup.com, and you'll see that we have an enormous library of both online teaching resources. We have, if you were to become a member of APPI, which is available to anyone around the world, we have a big research library and a video tutorial library. So we're really committed to delivering, high value content for professionals. So allied health, rehab therapists, Pilates teachers, fitness professionals, and there's an enormous amount, not just of the education courses. We have over 56 different education options that people can take up. You can follow us on Instagram, of course, at APPI Health Group. Follow myself, which is at glenn.withers.physio. And we also have a TV subscription model, APPI TV, which is full of classes that you can sort of take on at home as well. So the website's probably the best place. Resource-wise, APPI TV is a great resource for people. And also just check out the various sort of digital options that you have, such as ProLive. Like as a studio owner, any studio owner out there who's not using this sort of a system, you really need to have a look at it, because it helps improve your professionalism, but also helps from a retention point of view, which helps build the revenue.
Perfect. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Glenn. And thank you very much to all of our listeners to watching one more episode of Rehab Unplugged. Thank you and have a great time.
Cheers. Thanks, Andres. Bye now.
Cheers. Thanks.